Welcome to the Space for It with Makayla and Jacob. We are two therapists working to navigate what it means to make space for what comes up as part of the human experience. And today, we are going to be talking a little bit about what it looks like to live your life in a way that empowers other people to live their lives as well. And we're going to start that by talking about a story, and more specifically, Makayla's going to tell us a story that she experienced, and that's going to be our jumping off point. So thank you for being here. Go for it, Makayla.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you for being here today. So this is a concept that I like to call the ripples, and I don't know if that's something that's like, I should look into this more, see if this is something other people experience as well. Basically, just like if you dropped a rock into a pond or something, that one action is now creating all of these different effects. So the story begins back in 2015, I believe, when my friend Mary and I went on a trip to Glacier National Park. And we just wanted to go visit this beautiful park. Honestly, it's on one of our broke bucket listers. We created a little video blog for like a hot second back in the day, but on our environmental bucket list, because my teachers had told me that like these are not going to be around for my lifetime. And so we made this trip, and I am fascinated by geology. So we went up to Glacier National Park. Well, we didn't know that a lot of things. We didn't know a lot of things going on this trip. We had brought a tent. We knew there were bears. We had a little bit of awareness of like not keep food in your tent. I don't know, just general things. But on the day we got there, it ended up being like a massive rainstorm. We were headed to Bowman Lake, and just got caught in this crazy rainstorm trying to make it to this trailhead. And finally we got there in the dark. We were waiting for people. It was just like, they eventually got there. We were concerned that it wouldn't all come through. And we had some plans to hike around, but nothing really specific. We just wanted to really kind of look around and see what this was like. So we ended up the next day, the rain had quit, but because of all the moisture, there were mosquitoes absolutely everywhere. I was covered head to toe in like clothes, but that didn't matter at all. These mosquitoes had like giant needles for how they get you, and they got me through everything. I had 35 bites, I think, on one hand. So
That's
kind
awful.
of miserable. So anyways, we went on a hike. It had gotten hot and humid and muggy, and so we come back down and kind of were like, we're over this. Let's go somewhere else in the park or just drive through. But down at the lake, we just walk up and notice there's like 25 people sitting around the lake in some form or fashion, just looking out over. It's glassy, it's gorgeous. If you look up pictures, apparently it's often like this because some of the pictures are just fantastic. And you can see beautiful rocks, you can see logs and trees that have fallen in over time. But we were hot and covered in mosquito bites and really muggy. And so we were like, I want to swim. And no one at this point is disturbing. There's a gorgeous, beautiful lake that is just completely glass. But we're like, well, it'll go back to that eventually. And so we just go jump in. We're having a beautiful time in this gorgeous landscape, and just finally feeling a little bit cooler. The mosquito bites are getting a little bit of like a cold bath, so that always feels nice on those. And we're just having a good time, like laughing with each other, enjoying the lake. And we get out and we're gonna head over to our car to go, I think, do the road to the sun or something like that in the park. And this guy comes up to us and is like, hey, can I tell you this quote? Like, you guys just made me think of it as you were in the lake. And we were like, sure, what is it? And so I think he quotes Nelson Mandela, but it's actually a Marianne Williamson quote. But the quote is, as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. And that hit me. In that moment, I don't know if I really understood how much that would impact my life And I don't know if that guy knew how much that would impact my life. I doubt it. I doubt he could have known. But he just thanked us for enjoying the lake in the way that we knew how. Before we had jumped in, no one else had that day. Not that he had seen. And he realized that like he could also jump in just by our act of doing it. And so over time, I think Mary and I talked about this quite a bit, but really it stuck somewhere in my heart, because I realized that like if I do nothing else in this world but live my life in a way that I find beautiful or valuable or worthy of living, like even just doing that has these ripple effects that go out and give other people unconscious permission to do the same or impact other people in some sort of way. So that's the story that kind of brought this episode together.
I love that story for so many reasons. And in a big part of what initially comes to mind when I hear it is the idea of like what actually holds us back from doing that. Like what holds us back from making the decision in the moment that we want to make. And I'm curious, like when you and Mary were thinking about jumping into the lake, did you have any reservations about doing it?
It's a great question. And given that it was 10 years ago, which is wild to say.
That's true.
I can't recall fully. I could imagine that it crossed our mind though. At that point, how old would I have been? It's like 20. I think just before I turned 21. So I imagine it crossed our mind for sure. And at that point, we were so hot and covered in mosquito bites and muggy that it overrode our care of what anyone else thought.
That last thing you said, our current like position overcame the weight of the judgment of others. I think that's huge. Because a lot of the time, I think the reason we don't do things like that is fear of judgment from others. And when we miss out on something like that, I think it truly is missing out. Like, this comes up a lot as a parent too, where like my kids will want me to do something that's playful and silly. And if we're in public, like if we're at home, I'm like, sure, absolutely. And in public, there's so much more hesitancy because it's like, what will people think of me? Yeah. Like I'm supposed to be an adult, a professional. And yet those experiences, as in the experiences that come from being uninhibited by that fear of judgment, like they can turn into not something that's not just meaningful for us, but also like that guy said, like something that shined light for him on this reality that, I could also get in the lake. Because swimming in mountain lakes, as much as they're often freezing, is so refreshing. And it's like you said, even if you disturb the lake now, assuming you don't tear up the whole lake, which you could not do, I don't think, it will go back to being like mirror-like, crystal, like smooth, still, beautiful. I
love that you bring up the experience of that, like perception of others as a parent, because I can imagine kids invite you all the time to be in that carefree space of just being, really just playing, being. So I'm curious, like, where does this come from? And how is it useful? And how do we overcome it? Like, in the spaces that it's not useful?
I love that question for so many reasons. Okay. We're not born thinking this. Because like what you just said there, that idea that kids invite us into it, they invite us into it because they live there. Kids live in this space where they aren't as inhibited. And then over time, as they age, as they're in school, as their peers are critical or judgmental, then it begins to shift. Like this brings up a conversation I once had where we were talking about participating in something at school. And I was talking to a teenager and I asked them a question. I was like, hey, would you would you do this activity that you just said you wanted to do? And they were like, oh, absolutely not. I would not do that. And I was curious. So I said, why would you? Why would you not do that fun activity while you're outside with the rest of your peers? And their response was, oh, because I would get so made fun of. Like if I do that as much as I want to, I know that I will be the laughing stock of the class. And I think in a lot of ways that's one of the unhealthy reasons that we learn to do this. But I think there's also a flip side, because we don't exist in a vacuum. And as much as us modeling doing something like that can have a really positive impact on someone, there's also the potential for everybody to get on board doing something that's destructive or harmful or not a good idea. And so I would like to think that in addition to this kind of painful or harmful judgment piece, there is also a piece of just like, as a human, you have a conscience. You have this part of you that's like, maybe there should be hesitancy around doing certain things. I would like to think that exists, although sometimes I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I could see that.
Would you have noticed it if once you got in the water, other people started getting into the water, or did other people start getting in?
That's a good question too. I can imagine I would have noticed if other people got in the water with us. And as I remember it, I don't think anyone did at that moment. I also think it helped that I had someone with me.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because we could kind of validate or accept each other and be like, we're in this together. So screw what everyone else thinks, kind of thing. Like it was a little bit easier, I think, in that moment to do that with someone else. Yeah.
Right before we started recording this, I showed you a video, and it's on YouTube. We'll have it linked underneath, or wherever you're getting this, we'll have it linked there. But it's called The First Follower, Leadership Lessons from a Dancing Guy. And it's essentially about this idea that leadership as a concept, as like, hey, there's one person who is the leader, is an overhyped thing, because what matters is that you have people who actually turn a random nut dancing on the hill, into a leader. Because a leader is not a leader unless there are followers. And what's unique about doing something with someone is that, in a sense, you can both be the leaders and the followers. Because you're not just isolated, you're already one step of the way, because you're demonstrating that two people can do this and make it enjoyable. And I think that, like, it makes total sense that, like, that would have been a felt experience to be like, oh yeah, there's two of us here. Because it makes it easier to stand out almost.
I think at the heart of not doing things like that, not being carefree or being really self-censored, is this fear of rejection, like social rejection. And so in the fact of having someone else with you doing something, and again, there can be a positive and negative situations for any of this, but in this experience, it was a really positive thing to help us like let that fear of judgment be kind of gone, because our social rejection wasn't at risk, really, because we were doing it together and we cared enough about each other that it was like, I really care more what this person thinks than these people I don't know.
How often in your life do you think you've missed opportunities because of that feeling of inhibition that kept you from acting when you maybe now wish you would have?
That's a fun question. Like, the immediate response in my mind is like, well, being a people pleaser for like most of my life, so many things in my life that I would have done. And I don't even remember them, like, because it's just been a way of life to like not do those things. But I will say that the more that I've explored and healed some of those like people-pleasing tendencies and done, I would call, inner child work or reparenting, also known as like healing childhood trauma, or just kind of healing in general. That relationship with like my inner child is that second person in a lot of
Mm.
spaces. So it's like, as long as she won't reject me
Mm-hmm.
and I won't abandon her, then we can do most anything. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
remember I think it was last year or 2 years ago, I was in our local dog park and it was in the winter, someone had built a snowman that had like half melted. And so there was this big like chunk of snow under this pine tree. And it was
Mm.
perfect for stepping up onto one of the, like, so I could go sit in one of the branches. And I was like, I want to climb a tree. I haven't climbed a tree since I was a kid. And like, I used to love climbing trees. And while part of me initially was like, what are people going to think? I was also like, I don't really care. Because my inner child wants to climb this tree. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great. In being able to be like playfulness is a highly underrated category, thing, attribute. We'll go with attribute. Trait. That also is good. But playfulness, play is the original language.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't see people with tiny little babies being like, okay, now I'm going to talk to you and I need you to... No, like, with babies, we're all like, ooh, doo, 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 and we do all these little things and saying peekaboo. And we do that because that's how we communicate that we're there, that we're care, that we're attuned, that we're present.
Mm-hmm.
And then play moves into, like, further into childhood with all sorts of, like, interactions together and coming up with things and just having joy together. And then in adulthood, we squash it like a bug because we're like, no, don't. There's no room for that. This is a very serious thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we lose so much because of that. Because play brings life, it brings joy, it brings, like, laughter is actually really healthy. It's a really positive thing.
Yeah. And they've done studies too. Play is also how we problem solve. As kids, and I think in other ways, they say it takes, like, I'm giving out numbers that I don't know, like, are exact, but the ratios are closer. If you are trying to learn a new thing, it takes like 400 repetitions to learn it. If you are just doing it like this step, and trying it seriously. If you are playing, it takes like 40, like 20 to 40. It is
a huge difference.
Hugely different.
Part of what comes to mind when I hear that is, like, the difference between how dopamine has our brain work and how cortisol has our brain work.
Yes.
Because when we are stressed, when we're putting undue pressure on ourselves, it creates cortisol. Our bodies create cortisol, and that actually inhibits the process of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when you are doing something that you enjoy, in addition to other things, your body secretes dopamine, which actually enhances our ability to, like, be engaged and be present and be thinking and be creative. And it makes perfect sense. Like, it makes perfect sense that it would be so much faster to learn something there than if you were stressed.
Totally. I love how you bring that reaction in, because as you say that, yeah, it's like when we're worried about survival and that cortisol is there when our threat response is activated, so many of our systems go offline. Like our digestion, our rest, our sexual drives, or not drives, but if you've listened to previous episodes, you would catch that one. But so many things go offline. So it makes sense that our ability to, like, learn in those moments wouldn't be near as active, or, yeah. Even processing information is done in a very different way when that is introduced. But when we're able to rest and be at a state of regulation, and then even a state of enjoyment and pleasure, like, there's so much more space there to process and learn.
So I looked it up because I was curious, because 400 versus a lot less felt like an extreme example. So I decided to Google it, fact check. I love it.
I love it.
And according to what I found, if you are learning something through, like, a multisensory play approach, it's going to be 30 to 50% fewer repetitions than if you're learning it outside of it. And so maybe a little bit, but like the numbers that it gave is if a traditional, like, outside of play, outside of multisensory, like if you're going to have to repeat something 20 to 50 times to learn it,
Mm-hmm.
in a playful multisensory approach, it would be like 5 to 15.
Yeah.
Which, if
So-
if we're talking
Still a
5
big
to
difference,
50.
but I really expanded that out. Maybe
But-
something I'd read was off. I
It-
don't
it's
want to
always
own
possible.
that. I don't want to own that big of a gap.
but I do that all the time. I love to skew the numbers in my favor. But either way, I feel like that still makes the point where if you're able to engage with something playfully, it's different than if you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the point we're going for. So there we go.
Yes.
Take that.
Thank you for the grace. I will own that was off by quite a little bit. Yet the point still stands. Play makes it fewer repetitions, and it's, easier to learn something.
Talking about this reminded me of something, because I have always been a very inhibited person. Like, if I thought something would make me stand out, I would definitely not do it. In fact, I would actively go out of my way to make sure that I was not standing out ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think usually, especially like when I was in college and high school, and probably after college for several years, like a decade, I'm working on this now. Having kids has really helped me a lot.
Yeah.
I think that when I would see people doing things, I would probably experience a twinge of like, I wish I could do that. But because I can't, I'm going to be judgmental about the fact that they're doing it.
Mm.
Which I think that from the other side, that's just sad.
Mm.
But also, that negatively impacts other people too. So there's this story that I often tell about one of my ex-girlfriends. So if you ever listen to this, hello, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about this. But I had an ex who was really good at and loved dancing. And dancing was not my thing because I was bad at it. I don't have a whole lot of coordination for that. And like, I grew up in a family with lots of complex feelings around dancing. But when I was in college, we went swing dancing once.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so bad. Like, I think I had told her beforehand, like, I will go with you, but I'm not a good dancer. But I was so bad. And I think I was probably kind of cold and harsh about it too.
Mm.
Because I was like, this is dumb. Why, if I'm not good at this, why would anybody else want to do this? This is stupid. We should all go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I am pretty sure that she cried afterwards.
Mm.
Because probably a combination of how I was about it and how bad I was at it.
Mm.
And I think that's really sad now. Like, I look back and I regret that. I wish that I had been willing to be more open to being uncomfortable and actually challenging myself to get better at it. And that's such a good representation, a sad representation, but good representation of how when we are inhibited by feeling like, oh, I can't allow myself to engage joyfully in this, that can negatively impact others. And it can cause, in the same way that you can show up and jump in the lake and empower people to be like, oh my goodness, I could also do that. Not doing that disempowers people in the same way, or I guess the inverse way.
Mm.
And that's significant, because this isn't just about you. Like, as humans, we live collectively. As much as we in Western society have very individualistic views of everything that are very unhealthy, I have feelings there. Like, we still impact each other in what we do.
Mm.
And that's worth noting, because we should take that into account. Like, just because you feel like you're being judged negatively doesn't mean there might also be like the inverse of that there too. That makes sense? I think that made sense.
Like judging other people negatively.
You might feel like there might be people, here we go, I got it. I found the words. There might be people in the crowd who are like, no, nobody should do that. But there also might be people in the crowd who are like, I wish somebody would do this.
Mm-hmm.
They're both there.
Yeah. And some of the people who are like, nobody should do that, might be deeper down that they don't recognize. Like, I wish I could do that.
That sounds very familiar. That feels very pointed. It's fine. It's
Well,
good.
but I think that's such a beautiful point, because so much of our being, like, I think as humans, for whatever reason, I don't know exactly, we tend to take things personally. And there's an opportunity a lot of times in these spaces to like see what is reflecting in us. Like,
Mhm.
what is this judgment that is showing up about what this other person is doing? Like, why is that coming up? What is that hitting on in me? I don't know. Is it an insecurity I have? Is it something
Mm.
again that I feel like I wish I could do? A jealousy that shows up? Is it
Mhm.
and so there's an opportunity to learn something there if you're
Mhm.
open to it. But then there's also, I absolutely love, there's this concept of sympathetic joy. Have you
Mm.
heard of this?
No, but it sounds great. I
Okay.
love it already.
I love it too. So sympathetic joy is this concept that like when we see someone else happy or having a good time, enjoying themselves, doing something they love, like that we can tap into that
Mm.
by seeing that happiness as also our happiness. Like we can be happy for that person who is happy. And
Mhm.
it I think it can be hard when you start because I think again in that personal way that our brains seem to work sometimes, that judgment and negative bias comes a little easier. And it's like, well, they have that. And it's like if we're thinking about it as a piece of the pie and they have a piece of the pie, well, then there's less pie for everyone else. And that's
Mhm.
a common way that I think a lot of us think about it. But when we think about it instead, like it's a candle, and one candle can light millions, billions of candles,
Mhm.
then that's the concept of sympathetic joy. Like, can we allow their joy to be experienced by us just by seeing them? By seeing
Mhm.
someone smile because they're getting to see their dog when they get home after a long day's work. And like, as I think about it, like I notice a smile come to my face.
Mhm. I saw it.
Yeah. And there's this ability for our brains to do this. It's also called like vicarious experiencing or
Mhm.
appreciative joy or empathetic joy. So this is
Mm.
also an option, I guess, that I would invite you to try on is like next time you see someone having a big smile, having fun, doing something they love, notice what shows up, but then also
Mhm.
notice, can I let the corners of my mouth lift just a little bit? Like, can
Mm.
I feel their joy for them or with them?
Mhm.
It's really cool. It's a really cool experience. Have you ever done this?
I don't think I've ever consciously thought about can I feel their joy, but I can tell you, I can tell you that I do, because like I feel things. I'm a feeler. I'm human. All humans feel, I would argue. But I feel things very deeply. Like I will be listening to books and I will start tearing up based on what I'm hearing in the book. When it's books like
Mhm.
I just listened to Pixar and Beyond, which is essentially a biography of the CFO of Pixar when it first started. That
Okay.
book made me tear up. That is not a book that I don't think makes people tear up. And like I do that with books when I see people, like any videos that you've ever seen of like people being reunited with family members or pets or anything like that, every time.
Oh,
And
every time.
even like if I'm at the park, because I have children, I don't go many places, but if we do go somewhere, it's probably a park. And like I can see interactions happen there where it's like someone is getting their needs met by a parent or someone else, or someone is not. And I feel those things, and like those things bring tears to my eyes or a smile to my face. So absolutely, I know that I feel that and I've done that, but I have
Mhm.
never thought about it so technically.
Yeah.
But now I probably will.
I would invite you to. Yeah. And especially like if you notice your mind is being judgmental because again and as you were saying that I actually wonder um and thinking about it as empathetic experiencing, I wonder if we kind of close ourselves off to it,
Ooh.
to empathy, because we don't only get the positive, pleasant, joyful emotions,
Mm.
but also sometimes some of those more painful ones. So I wonder if that's part of where the judgment comes from is like,
Mm.
if I feel good with this person, then when this person is sad or when I see sadness, then I may also feel sadness.
I'm sure that that's part of it, because I know that, like, this is, oh, hopefully she does not mind being brought into this. If she does, she's our editor, so she will cut it out. But my wife and I are very different in this regard, because I will dive into things head first and be like, I will jump off the cliff and be fine if I hit the ground and there's not water, emotionally. Literally, I don't want to jump off a cliff, just in case anybody's concerned. I don't. Unless there's water at the bottom, in which case, sign me up. I love that all day. But I don't mind disappointment, essentially. Like, I don't mind getting really excited and then being let down, versus my wife does more. And so she is much less likely to emotionally dive into or emotionally invest in something if there's potential for disappointment.
Mm.
And I would personally argue, she would probably argue with me on this, but I would personally argue that the joy that you get is greater when you let yourself fall into it more freely. Now, I will say, I read a study forever ago. This was like 10 years ago, but I bring it up still on a regular basis because it's fascinating. I read a study about expectations and their impact on our dopamine levels.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And so relevant to so much of life. But when you are excited about something, when like there's something coming and you know it's coming, your brain will actually, it'll start like pre-gaming dopamine, essentially. And so the anticipation of it coming starts to get you excited and energetic, which makes it so that when it comes, it's like this full speed ahead, exciting, like flood of dopamine that's wonderful, which actually ends up giving you more dopamine than if you're just surprised by something that you didn't see coming. But the flip side to this is that when you're excited about something and it doesn't happen, then your brain actually triggers a stress response and it flushes all the dopamine away. And you have to be okay with that experience. If you're going to get excited, you have to be okay with the fact that that might end in a very disappointing, unfortunate experience.
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody is. Understandably so, because it's not pleasant, for the record. Like, I do get that.
Yeah. As you say that too, I'm thinking about, like, so often our brains create expectations that are unhelpful because they're expectations that pretty much can't be met. There's almost no way that our brain can come up with the exact experience we are going to have. And so there's always a discrepancy. I've invited myself, but also a lot of my clients, to notice where our mind creates expectations and those stories and those images, and we desire what we want to happen. And then also to hold that really gently and be like, I see you, brain. Like, I see you creating this whole experience before we've gotten there. Let's just see what it is when it is there. And for me, that's been a really cool thing, because instead of that disappointment, it's like, I am now actually in the present moment experiencing this and able to, and maybe also because I value and practice play, but I'm able to see the opportunities in the moment as they are. Like, even if it's something goes completely wrong, I can see that maybe as an adventure or as part of the experience. Like, how are we going to get through this together? And so there's more, I guess, adaptability for me to do it that way than if I allow my mind to run with, like, this is what it's going to look like, this is how it's going to be.
That brought up something really interesting in my mind, which is the idea that when we don't just allow ourselves to interact it, but if we take it a step further and interact with others about it, that can make a huge difference. Like, let's take you and Mary at the lake, bringing this back to the beginning. If you and her went to all 25 people who are sitting there and were like, hey, we're thinking about jumping in. Have you thought about jumping in? Surely you would not have hit 25 no's. Surely. Unless they were all curmudgeons, in which case then you might have. I just want to throw out the word curmudgeons in there. But I think there's something really valuable about communicating our expectations, because if we have them and we're experiencing them already and we communicate them, A, that just gives us kind of a gauge of, like, what is the likely, like, how are people likely to receive this? But B, if we bring that into a more personal thing, like where you're interacting with a partner or a family member, when you have expectations, if you communicate them, you can actually pursue making them happen. versus what so often happens, which is that I'm mad at you because you didn't follow the plan that I have in my head that I never told you about.
Yeah.
Which is a very common relationship problem.
It really is, yeah. And one of my favorite questions, like, have you told them that?
I
So
love
often.
asking that, and people hate hearing it.
Yeah. And yep, I could feel the same in my own counseling. I'm like, yeah, yeah, probably ought to.
Well, you see, here's why it
communicate.
happened. They didn't really need to know.
Yeah.
They should know already.
But I love that. I love too that you bring that up, because that's a place where expectations can be really valuable and helpful. And like that context, like you're saying, being able to communicate, like, in this relationship, this is what I expect, and this is what I am willing to receive, and what I'm not. Like, that's a really valuable place for expectations. Certain expectations, again, maybe realistic expectations, or, but then there's another context where it's like, again, our mind just is like, oh, valuable here, valuable everywhere. Not really so. There's places where it's not helpful, and it gets us into that space of being more disappointed, not enjoying the experiences we are having, or even, again, in that shutdown state where the cortisol is released, that we're not able to be open and flexible in those experiences to, like, see the opportunity that's there, or be present with the people we're with, or so expectations. And again, I love that you bring that in. It depends. Sometimes very useful, sometimes not so much. So back to the ripples a little bit. And I love how there's so many places to go from this. But I wonder, for you, have there been any of those kind of moments in your life?
I don't think I've ever had anybody come up to me after something and be like, hey, because you did that, then I felt more empowered. Like, I think that is an incredible experience that you had. And I think that I am primed I have been primed to never create that, based on how inhibited I have been for most of my life. Like, would I be the one jumping in the lake? No, I'd be the one being like, oh my goodness, those people jumped in the lake. Can you believe them? And then secretly being like, I wish I could jump in the lake. I wish I'd been here first so that nobody else could have stopped me. Because all of these people sitting here are totally going to stop me.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing that I think about is actually a lot of what I do on social media. Because social media, and I don't know why I categorize this differently, because it's going to sound like it totally contradicts what I just said. I post a lot of content about being dyslexic. And a lot of that content it's oriented either around being like educational or letting you know that you're not the only one who experiences what you experience. And so often when I do those videos, it's things like, hey, this is an embarrassing thing that I experience. And I get comments from people being like, thank you. Like, I'm so grateful to know that I'm not alone in this. In a lot of ways, I think that for me is that experience of being able to put that out there and give people a chance to find a space to not be so alone.
I think it's a beautiful way to send ripples out. And I wonder if part of that started with, like, self-acceptance and understanding.
I love that you brought up self-acceptance, because every conversation should end there eventually, right? But I think that's a huge piece of this, because part of how we overcome judgment is we accept that this is who I am, and your judgment really means nothing. Like, your judgment does not impact my value. It does not impact who I am. You can have it. You can have your judgment, hold it, do whatever you want with it. And I think that when we're able to do that, when we're able to accept ourselves, it's so much easier to be secure and to not be blown around by the winds of other people's judgment. Came up with that metaphor as I was talking about it. I'm sure I'm not the first. But I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I would say it depends too. Kind of like we're talking about in relationships. Like, there's a space for other people's judgment to be valuable. If it's someone we really care about. Because I've seen this in the opposite way, where people will be like, this is who I am. If you don't like me, that's on you. Which in a way it is. And that can really affect your relationships too with the
Mhm.
people you do care about. So
Oh, yeah.
being able and willing to say, like, it depends, a little bit of gray, it can be both. Does
Mm.
this person that is judging me, does their judgment or perspective of me matter? Will I ever see this person again?
Mhm.
Like, will, like, but if it's this person that I really care about telling me that I am not listening very well, or I'm being
Mhm.
really judgmental or something like that, like maybe I could listen to that. Or
Mm.
maybe I could at least check in. It was like, does what they're saying like have an impact or a weight to it that is
Mhm.
valuable for me to think about? It does take a little bit of slowing down, I think, to do some of these things.
Yeah.
But the other thing that comes to mind that I think is really valuable in that space is like when we open it up to like other people can unconsciously give us permission to do
Mm.
something. I think it's really neat because I've found that, like, myself, again, as with those more like maybe passive or people pleasing tendencies where I'm just like, I'm gonna watch before I do,
Mm.
or I'm gonna not cause conflict, or not say this thing, or not disagree with you.
Mhm.
It is also really valuable for me to see other people able to do that and in spaces where it's like useful, or for them to just be really self-confident,
Mhm.
but to be able to see like strong female roles and male
Mhm.
roles too, or even soft male roles, like that can give me permission to be like, oh, I don't always have to not have
Mm.
conflict. Like conflict can be safe,
Mhm.
or being soft and vulnerable can be safe. Like, so there's an opportunity, I guess, in other people's actions if we look at it that way, if we look for that opportunity.
Mhm.
It's like, how could this inspire or invite me to look at the world a little differently? Like, if they are okay, if I'm okay just as I am, and I don't
Mhm.
need to change anyone else to be like just like me, what's valuable in what they do, or how they are, or who they are, how they see the
Mhm.
world? How does that help me too?
As you were talking about that, one
Mm-hmm.
of the things I was thinking about is that, like, we can give people explicit permission to be themselves without even necessarily doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we just have to listen and then speak into it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the things that I have experienced a decent amount is if there's something that I want to do that I wish I could do but I feel like I can't. There have been multiple times in my life where I've said that to somebody, like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that, but we could never do that."
Mm-hmm.
And I've had multiple people, when I say that to them, they're like, "Why? Why not? Why couldn't you do that?" And every time I'm like, "Blah, blah, blah, because we can. It's a terrible idea." And they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "I don't I I I don't know. I have no defense." And even that, like, that's such a valuable thing, because if you can get somebody to question their self-judging voices, their self-criticism, like, that can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would invite, like, in doing that, there are ways that will shut people down.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why are you like that? Like, the more, like, might come across that way. But, like, the more curiosity you can bring
Mm-hmm.
to a conversation, I'd be like, huh, that's interesting that your brain got there. Like, how did it get there? Or like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like, bringing that sense of, whoa, that's not how I thought about it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. Help me understand. I think can be such a beautiful way, like you say, to like invite people to
Mm-hmm.
question, to be
Mm-hmm.
curious, and to accept, like, oh, my mind has told me this thing, but like maybe it isn't true.
There should be more space for being curious and playful and exploratory in life. And this is the space for it. But also, everywhere should be the space for having these conversations, for being able to be more open. And
Mhm.
it's also, like you were saying, like, we need to see more examples of people who are actually empowered to be like, no, accept me, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to do the thing. And it's going to be great. Because whoever you are, whatever you look like, you benefit from seeing people who look like you doing things. And you're allowed to be that person. It's not always easy, especially if you're the first or some of the first followers. Like, that's hard. But it's still really valuable. And just because there isn't someone who looks like you doing a thing doesn't mean that you're not allowed to do it. And I do feel like we should add a disclaimer onto all of this. When you're making any of these decisions, don't do anything that's harmful to people. Like, if nobody's doing a thing and the thing is harmful to people, don't be the person doing the thing.
Yeah. And don't be the person supporting the person doing the thing. If it's harmful to other people.
Yeah. Just throwing that out there, because we're putting this on the internet, and the internet is full of people who will be like, so this means I could fill in the blank. And no, we're not giving people permission to hurt people.
Yeah. Thank you for the
giving
disclaimer.
Permission to jump into freezing cold lakes.
Yes.
In the mountains.
In the spirit of joy and play and carefree. Yes. And that's not the only space, like Jacob said, that exists for that. Like, where in your life could you do something playfully? Like, even how you walk through your house. What would that look like if I was a kid? What would that look like if I was being playful? Like, just even thinking about that. Like, how could I embody play in this moment? Or, yeah, just starting that conversation with your brain. Give it something to look for.
I think it's great. Do you do that? Do you walk around your house funnily?
I don't at the moment.
You should.
But I think at different points I have. And as when I started my journey of my intention being play, when I do yoga, it's like, how can I do this playfully? How can I move my body playfully? How could I climb a tree today? Or like buy a pair of socks that my inner child really wanted, like that I never probably would have bought before because I would have been worried about what someone else thought. Or sing. My partner and I, this is where probably most of our play comes in. We love to sing songs about like our dog or about what we're doing around the house or about like
that's awesome. Literally
anything. And so I think we find a lot of and practice a lot of play between each other in that way, and other ways, but yeah.
When you can embody a spirit of play, it helps everything.
Yeah.
Which is a massive generalization, but I think it's true.
Well, it's the opposite of that fight, flight, freeze. Like we can't be in that space and in those two at the same time, because one, it has that nervous system response, and one is at a regulated state. So it can help us, practice being in that regulated state. I don't know. I don't know a lot. I just realized that. Because I want to invite people to try it on for themselves. I don't want to say, I guess that's what I'll end with for my portion. I don't want to say anything in an absolute. I want everyone to try it on and see what works for them and get rid of the rest. Like, take what works, get rid of what doesn't, or try it on again in a year when you're different, or, but that's why I say I don't know a lot.
That brings me back to the thing that your supervisor said that then you also say often, which is not that there is only one right or anything else. It's there are many right ways.
There are many right ways. And I just created stickers. I forgot to tell you. And I have our At the Space For It podcast on the sticker. So, not sure where I'm going to be able to get those other than just passing them around Boise here, but we'll see. Maybe I can send you some.
Yeah, we can figure it out. Yes. And if you are listening and you want some of those stickers, let us know.
Yeah.
Because if you made it to this point of the podcast, which is all the way at the end, which I don't know if you know this, Makayla, but on social media, the amount of people who listen or watch to the end of content is like less than 5%.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, when my retention rates are always like
Yeah.
And yeah, by the end, basically no one's watching. So if you made it to the end, I'm sure you appreciate us and care. And if you do want one of those and you don't know us personally already, let us know. Let us know in the comments and we'll figure it out. So
let us know if this is helpful, what else you want us to talk about, what you like, if you want a sticker. Yeah.
Tell all of your friends about us.
Thanks for being here.
We appreciate you. And whatever time of day it is, wherever you are, whenever, have a lovely rest of the day.